Hello, good morning from Abidjan. I am Edwige. I am a writer, a literary translator, and a literary activist. I must say that when I started writing, I did not know that I would become a translator, let alone a literary translator. And I certainly did not think that I would become a literary activist. The writing part is easy. I put pen to paper for the first time because I cannot say that I became a writer, but I put pen to paper for the first time when I was 8 years old. And that was simply because I wanted to read something. We were living at that time in the north of Côte d'Ivoire, in a city called Odiene, which is some 900 kilometers from Abidjan, where I currently live. To put it in perspective, even here in Abidjan in 2021, the big problem is accessibility to, to books, to literature from other African writers, even writers who are closer to us, like writers based in Burkina Faso or Guinea or Mali or Togo. So then, some 900 kilometers from Abidjan, we had a huge problem to access books. So I had finished reading all the books we had, in our home library. There was no books, or at least we had some books because my father was a teacher there, a mathematics teacher, the first Black mathematics teacher of that city, and all of his colleagues were French. So I think one day he told his colleagues that, my daughter loves to read, but, she has no books, and they gave him lots of books, and he was really pleased with that. And of course, I was really pleased with that when he brought these books at home. Only thing is, when I started reading the books, well, the reality of that I was seeing in those books did not match with my reality as a child living in Ojene with a little vegetable patch. We used to play in the dirt with the children from the neighborhood, and these children had, seemed to have structured play. They will go out with their bicycles. They will play in the snow, and I did not even know what snow was. I did not see snow for the first time until I was 15. So what did I do? Like a good wild child, I started tearing the pages of the books to do other things with it. I think fans or something. Thankfully, my father one day was walking around the compound, and he saw the pages of these books, and he picked them up, and he was like, "But these are the books that I gave you." I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "But why are you tearing them?" And I said, "But I did not like them." So he gathered them and he said, "You do not, tear pages of books." So, and so that's when I started writing, and I wrote on and off while we were, in Odiene. Of course, we moved to Yamoussoukro, the center of the country. And after my baccalaureate, I went to England for my studies. And of course, there I was in my world. I could, there were libraries, as we say here in Abidjan, Agogo. There were bookstores. I had access to books from writers from Vietnam, from Japan, from England, obviously from France, but of course, also from South Africa, from Kenya, from Nigeria, all of these writers. And, and I developed, I got a sense of what I liked and what I did not like. I got a sense of what good writing was, what good writing wasn't. And I also decided to learn more about the craft of writing. And in 2014, I returned back to Côte d'Ivoire. And in that same 2014, I got selected as a laureate for the Africa 39 prize. And I went to Nigeria, to meet the other 38 writers from everywhere, from the DRC, from Nigeria, from Kenya. And it was great to be with these writers. But in the conversations that we were having, I realized that, the writers that they knew from the French-speaking part of Africa, and from my country were people like Amadou Kourouma, Véronique Tadjo, because she had taught at in South Africa. But they did not know people like Regina Yaou or Armand Gauze or even Bernard Adier or Ake Loba or many of these other writers. And I too did not know many writers from well, I knew, but I mean the people from my country, the people I will speak to in my country did not know many writers from that part of the world. They could mention Chinua Achebe to you, or Ngugi wa Thiong'o, or Wole Soyinka, but that stayed there. They did not know people like Lola Shoneyin, or Abubakar Adam Ibrahim, or Zuki Swavana. And that's when I think the click happened in my head. And I was like, well, and it was 2014, we're talking about, Africa being the hopeful continent, Africa being this, the future of Africa, et cetera, et cetera. But that was other people saying it. And I was like, well, we as African, we cannot speak of our development if we do not even know ourselves. And the best way to know a person is to know of their stories, is to know their realities, to realize that, I may be an Ivorian, they may be a Nigerian, but we have, there are similarities in our cultures. There are we deal with the same issues. I know what is lobola. Of course, in Cote d'Ivoire, it is called la dot, but la dot is lobola. I know it. And somebody from France may not know lobola or may not understand the cultural context behind it, for instance. And I thought we cannot develop, our continent if we do not know who we are, if there is, if we're not telling each other our stories. And I think that's what brought me then to literary translation. And of course, obviously, I write in English, and my family does not speak English, does not read English. And I have also part of the family that does not speak or read French at all, or any other language. So I started translating for my family, but also for the other writers, so that so that we will know a bit what we were writing, what were the realities in our different contexts. So I did a translation. I also facilitated creative writing workshops and literary translation workshops. It was important for me to do things like facilitating creative writing workshops, because in my country I realized that in the writing there were a lot of explanations that were happening. People explain things like baka or achiki or aloko, with the little asterisk. And I'm thinking, well, nobody's ever explained what pizza is. We all know what pizza is. We all know what creme brulee is. We all know what hamburger is. Nobody is, no writers writing that and putting a little asterisk and, explaining it at the bottom of the page, hamburger, blah, blah, blah. But so why are we doing that? So, even in the writing, of course, we explain things like plot and, characterization. But then, for me, language is political. So in my writing, in the literary translation workshop that I did, this is something that I really, insisted upon. Who are we writing for? Let's write for, if I'm translating a book by a Kenyan writer or a short story by a Kenyan writer, and I see dialogue in it, I am not going to be looking for, if there is the word money in slang in the Kenyan writer's book, I'm not going to be looking for lose. This does not really apply my context. But if I say, even if I say l'argent or if I say le jet, people will get it. And you know, it contributes also to the development of our language, to, you know, these understandings, which I am, you know, the cross-cultural understanding, which I speak of. And I was really lucky to take part in wonderful initiatives like the Jalada translation project, where with Moses Kilolo, who was the coordinator of this project and the brain behind this project, to translate into, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 190 languages. We translated this story, this short story by the writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So we translated it into French, into Swahili, into Senufo, into Bamanakam, and that was great. I also took part in the Afro Young Adult project coordinated by Zuki Swavana. It was a project of the Goethe Institute Johannesburg, but coordinated by Zuki Swavana. And again, you know, we brought out this anthology of writings for young adult audience in French, in English, in Swahili. And I also took part in initiative like the creative writing workshop of Bakwa magazine based in Cameroon, and also the literary translation workshop. And I mentored young literary translators. And those were great initiatives. But I was also thinking again about, you know, my country, my context. Again, I mentioned that, you know, accessibility to literature is very difficult here in Cote d'Ivoire. But also Cote d'Ivoire, you know, I like to say it is the most Francophone of Francophone African countries, in the sense that we do not have a national language. Our national language is French, but French that we have made our own, French that, you know, we have this thing called le français populaire ivoirien, so the popular Ivorian French. And we have, and of course, we also have Nushi, and the Nushi language, you know, was born in the streets of Abidjan, and it, you know, and now we have words like enjaillement, like enjaillé, like boucantier, that are now even in the Larousse dictionary. And you know, and I think this is where the power of language lies. But I mentioned that I was thinking about my context here in Cote d'Ivoire, where depending on which statistics you take into account, 49% or 51% of the population cannot read or write French or any other language. So orality is is a big thing here, and we also have our sociological way of doing literature, you know. And I think one of the things we do not pay attention to sometimes, or we do not take into account, is that sociological way of doing literature. Here, you know, people will say, well, you know, Ivorians do not read, you know, but Ivorians do read. We just have our ways of reading. Like if you're in Abidjan, on the streets of Abidjan at 5 a.m. in the morning or 6 a.m. in the morning, you have newspapers that are put on stands, and people are gathered and they are reading the headlines of the papers. And if like a headline grabs them, they will either buy the newspaper if they have the money to buy it, or they will rent the newspaper and then read it and then put it back. And that art, I like to call it art of reading, that art of reading is called titrology. So in 2020, in March 2020, before the pandemic really hit and we had to close everything, I set up a library. It's called 1949. It is a library of women's writings from Africa and the Black world. And pandemic hit, and of course we closed, but we reopened in May 2020. And that's one of the things we led with. We led with titrology. We had wonderful literature, translated literature from Uganda, you know, Chintu by Jennifer Makumbi. We had Homegoing by Yagiazi in French, but also in English. And so we led with titrology in the sense that we had some book extract that we pegged on, outside the library, and people will pass and they will stop and they will read and they will come inside the library and they will read the extract that were placed on tables. Because if you do not have a culture of reading in a country, if you do not have a culture of literature in that way in a country, you need to give people what they are used to. People are not going to grab a big book and start reading it. This is not how we read. So they will come in, they will pick up this extra, they will tell their friends, they will, so the library can be quite noisy. Maybe that's how libraries are done here. But the library can be quite noisy because people will chat about the books. We have things like les causeries littéraires, where we will get the summary of the book spoken. So somebody will do a monologue of the summary of the book. And we did that with Baba Segui's wife by the writer Lola Shoneyin. And then later on talk about the books. And then people will come and want to borrow the book or sit down and read the book. So this is what, this is where for me, literary activism matter. You need to, to look at your context and, and do things. So, and it pleases me when I have people who come in a library and they are reading, Elizabeth Makumbi. They do not know that they are reading Elizabeth Makumbi. They know that they are reading a good story about some 300-year-old curse that was placed on a family, and they can relate to it. When they are reading Lola Shoneyin, they don't think, oh yes, we are reading Lola Shoneyin, the great Nigerian writer. They know that they are reading about this Baba Segi who went and got a fourth wife and then realized that, all of his children are actually not his. And, and they can relate that to their context. So for me, this is what is, this is how I use, translation. It is not just about translating from one language to another language. I always have a little smile when I read like on a call for application for short story submission, like, writers who write in English or Englishes. And nobody says that for French. It is like if you write in French, but we have Frenchies also. So when I do literary translation, my goal, my ambition is to bring those different Frenchies, the French spoken in Cote d'Ivoire, the French spoken in Togo, the French spoken in Burkina Faso. And I always like to say that I can speak French in front of a French person, and they will not know what I am saying if I do not want them to know what I'm saying. And yet it is French that I am speaking, not even Nushi French, but they will not know what I am saying. So, there are Frenchies, and that is my goal, to bring these Frenchies when I do creative writing workshop, when I do literary translation workshop, or when I translate literature. When I do literary activism, my goal is to foster conversation, to not have a part of the population, let's say the 51% here, who cannot read or write, outside of literary conversation, because they are all also important. They are participants in the development of the country, first of all, and of the continent. So they cannot be excluded from the conversations that are happening. They need to be included, and the way in which they can be included is through stories. And when we speak about these stories, then we can touch upon bigger issues. When we speak about stories of polygamy that are happening, Baba Segi, who discovers that none of his children are his. When we speak about how we treat our domestic workers, like, you pick up a book by Zuki Swavana, then we can have bigger conversation about gender equality, about post-colonialism, about economic development. For me, it is from stories, and then the conversation is not polarized. Because we are talking about experiences, about things we are living. So yes, in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's why I do literature. That's why I do the things that I do, and voila. Merci beaucoup.